Hey, welcome back to the Bean Scene. I'm your host, Maxwell Schaefer. August is National Water Quality Month, and in Iowa, you've probably heard plenty already. It's in the headlines, it's in conversations at the coffee shop and at the co-op. It's something just about every Iowan has heard about, thought about, or has an opinion on. But it's also a complicated issue, a lot bigger and more layered than any single headline can capture. So today, we want to slow down and dig into it. No finger pointing, no chasing one simple fix. We're here to have a thoughtful, honest conversation about where Iowa's water quality stands today and just how many different people are working on it from a lot of different angles. So here's where we're headed. We're going to start downstream with the people responsible for treating and delivering safe drinking water to hundreds of thousands of Iowans. Amy Kahler, CEO and General Manager of Des Moines Waterworks, and Tami Madsen, Executive Director of Central Iowa Waterworks. They're going to walk us through what actually happens between a river and your tap and clear up a few misconceptions along the way. Then we're heading upstream to Rebekah Jones with the Iowa Agriculture Water Alliance, who's going to tell us what's actually happening on the ground, the practices farmers are using right now to keep nutrients where they belong. And we'll close things out on one specific farm with Patrick White up in Clay County, who's going to make all of this real, what it actually looks like to put these ideas into practice year after year. Water doesn't stop at property lines or city limits. It's one connected system, and cleaning it up is going to take everybody. Treatment plants, conservation groups, farmers, and everyday Iowans working together. Let's get into it. Here's Amy and Tami with Waterworks.
I'm Amy Kahler. I'm the CEO and General Manager of Des Moines Waterworks, and up until a couple years ago, Des Moines Waterworks was the regional provider, and we had been since 1934 with our first suburb connection in Urbandale. That model made sense when more water was sold within the city of Des Moines, and then the suburbs hooked on. But over time, that ratio of suburbs and Des Moines flip-flopped. And soon, early 2000s, the more water was sold outside the city of Des Moines. And so that regional model where Des Moines provided the water really didn't fit as well anymore. And so over the years, we have looked at how do we regionalize. We took a couple runs at it, and very pleased to say that in 2024, we finally made it happen as a region. Des Moines Waterworks today is the largest contract operator for Central Iowa Waterworks.
So I'm Tami Madsen. I'm the Executive Director of Central Iowa Waterworks. And as Amy said, around April of 2024, Central Iowa Waterworks became operational. We are a regional water authority with 12 member agencies. We have 4 water producers. So Des Moines Waterworks is the largest, West Des Moines Waterworks, the City of Grimes, and the City of Polk City. And then we also have rural water providers, cities, and then board-governed utilities that are part of this model.
Yeah, a lot of people don't know that this is fairly recent, these changes. People pay their water bills, but really don't think about, how this works. And so walk us through, what actually happens at the treatment plants, because not all of them are doing the same thing, right?
At Des Moines Waterworks, the plants that we operate on behalf of the region, we have 3 different plants. And our largest is probably the one that is most familiar and the one we talk a lot about, and that's Fluor Drive. That is our flagship, our oldest treatment plant. Throughout those 3 plants that Des Moines Waterworks operates, we have different technologies. We have traditional lime softening. We have a reverse osmosis technology at one of the plants. And we have a deep bench of source waters. And we have that deep bench so that we can change and react to dynamic water conditions and make sure that we are taking from the best water quality in terms of water source as possible.
That's the beauty of regionalization. We also have other water treatment plants as well. So we have AC Ward in West Des Moines. We have the Grimes water treatment plant in Grimes, and then we have a Polk City water treatment plant as well. And those also have different technologies, RO, lime softening, they also diversify our water treatment resources as well.
Not all of them are facing the same challenges, right? Each water treatment plant has to do different things with the water. Can you differentiate that for us and explain what happens there and what that means?
At the Fluor Drive plant, it's multi-barrier, and really at most of the plants, at least that Des Moines Waterworks operates, we make sure that there is a multi-step process to make sure that we are treating for all the contaminants that we need to. And so it is a long process that takes about a day, start to finish, to actually treat the water and get it ready and safe to pump out into the distribution system for our customers.
Talk about lawn watering bans, because that's something that's obviously, kind of front-facing for most consumers, because we just take sort of our water for granted. We turn on the tap and it's always there for us and it's clean. When they happen, people assume it's nitrate, and that's always sort of the top headline. Is that accurate?
That's not always the case. So our water use plan is in place for many different reasons. It could be equipment failure. It could be a drought. It could be any reason that could affect the water supply to the public. It just so happens that recently it's been a water quality issue due to nitrate in our source waters.
So what else should Iowans then be paying attention to when you talk about it, other things other than nitrates? What are the other things that affect our water quality?
So right now we are building new plants in our regional system. So we're expanding the Grimes treatment facility, the Saylorville facility, and building a new West plant. And as we're going out and looking for source water, we're finding all kinds of emerging contaminants, and we have other things that affect our water treatment process. So things like PFAS, cyanotoxin is something that Des Moines Waterworks is finding as well. These are things that are in addition to nitrate, lots of different source water things that we're looking out for.
What is PFAS? Explain that one.
PFAS is commonly called the forever chemical, and these are compounds that are found in items that we interact with every day. Perhaps it's a burger wrapper from McDonald's or a nonstick skillet. Those have PFAS components to them. They are present in most of our bodies, and once they become present in our bodies, they're called forever because you can't get rid of them. And so they're something that are growing more attention, and there are water standards to ensure that we are treating for those.
So when you remove nitrates from water, this is a great question, and I'm really curious. So what happens to them when you remove them, because they don't just disappear or dissolve, right?
That's right. At the Fluor Drive treatment plant, we have an advanced treatment facility that we call the nitrate removal facility, very creatively named. And it has has 8 vessels that we can operate. And so when the source water, the rivers are high in nitrate concentrations, we turn on that facility. We don't run it all the time. We only run it when we need to in order to meet safe drinking water standards. And in some years, we don't run that facility at all. But when we do run it, it creates a discharge because we have to clean each vessel. And that discharge is high in sodium as well as nitrate. Des Moines Waterworks, under permit, used to put that back into the river, and a lot of people still think that we do put that discharge back into the river, but we don't. We invested several $million several years ago to construct a pipe to the WRA, the Wastewater Reclamation Facility, and we discharge it now to the WRA, and they're a good partner for us.
When you talk about water sources, what are they? What are those sources? I mean, we know wells, aquifers, rivers. Is that basically the list?
So our water treatment plants outside of the Fluor Drive plant use a variety of sources. So our AC Ward plant uses shallow alluvial wells along the Raccoon River and also the Jordan Aquifer. Our Grimes water treatment plant also uses shallow alluvial wells on the Raccoon and then Jordan Aquifer wells in addition to those. And then, of course, the Fluor Drive plant uses surface water sources. What we're finding when we're going out and looking for more water from the Jordan Aquifer is that it simply doesn't sustain our population. So according to the DNR and their hydraulic modeling, if we were to try to use only Jordan Aquifer water, our population would deplete that aquifer in just a matter of years. we would draw the aquifer down so low that whatever was left would not be appropriate for drinking water use.
So you really want to use the rivers first and foremost, and obviously when those dry up, if we're in a drought condition, how dry do they have to be before you can't even pull any water from them?
Des Moines Waterworks is right there at the Raccoon River, and I always have said there were days when I felt like you could walk across the Raccoon River and not get your ankles wet. But despite that, we were still able to get enough water from the river. But large cities, Des Moines, Cedar Rapids, Iowa City, where we have larger urban populations, as Tami said, the aquifer just can't sustain that. And so those larger cities and communities typically do rely on the rivers, and it has trade-offs. It's more plentiful, they recharge, but they also come with some of these water quality issues because they are so vulnerable to what's happening around the landscape around them.
For years, and really, this is to be completely, honest, I think the consumer has been hearing sort of this, and you've talked about this upstream, downstream issue. It's not necessarily a rural versus kind of city issue, right? I mean, what does that look like in practice? And what role do city residents play when it comes to clean water?
I think that city residents play a role in how we use land in the city, as well as how we think about things like when you're at Walmart and it's raining and you look down, you see that rainbow sheen on the parking lot. That is a contaminant going into a storm drain and into our source water. So as we're using things on our driveway, like changing the oil in our car, we have to be very careful about how that gets into the stormwater drain. Smart choices within the city are also as important as our smart choices out in the rural setting.
So we have rain events and of all different kinds. We just here in the last month or two, we've had these big gully washer events, where you get 3, 4, or more inches of rain in one fell swoop in just a few hours. Is that good for the aquifer, or is that good for the rivers, or do you prefer the kind of slow, steady rain that most farmers love, right?
We share that in common with farmers. We don't like, as water utilities, really anything in extreme. We prefer moderation in pretty much everything. Just because we have more water when it floods, it's actually dirtier water and it's harder for us to treat. It does more damage to the homes and the properties around the river. And so certainly that's never something that we like to see. And so the floodwater has additional sediment and nutrients, which again makes treatment more difficult.
Tell us about the Central Iowa Cover Crop Cedar. Tell us about this partnership and how did it come together and what has it accomplished?
Yeah, that's something that Des Moines Waterworks is really proud of. We believe that everyone is part of the solution to this water quality conversation and the issues that we're seeing in Iowa. And so we have worked over the last, I would say, 6 or 7 years to really develop partnerships upstream in the watershed. And the Cover Crop Cedar is one of those partnerships. We partnered with IDOLS, City of Des Moines, Polk County and Heartland Co-op, and Des Moines Waterworks. And so it was an innovative idea, unlikely partners coming together and doing something really great. And I just got a report on it yesterday. This is the last year of that program, at least as it was originally designed. And they fell just a little bit shy of meeting their number of acres in terms of a goal, but we're very proud of that.
Tell us your thoughts and impressions and maybe studies that you've done or any kind of information you can share about soil conservation practices and how farmers really in the last 10, 15 years have really worked very hard to control runoff and nitrate problems. So, what are your thoughts about that?
Both Tami and I have gone up into the watershed and visited with farmers who have been kind enough to show us and proud to show us the conservation practices that they've put in. And, they want to do the right thing. They want to make sure that land is there for potentially future generations. They're putting in bioreactors and cover crops, no-till, and they're just so proud to show us what they're doing because they do care about water and they care about their land. And so we just need more of that. We need to really scale that effort up. And I think that probably is dependent on funding. And these are tough times for farmers. Just a couple days ago, we saw the Des Moines Register article citing an ISU report that farming profits are down over 50%. So these are very tough times, and we acknowledge that, which is why it's important that we're all working together.
You've mentioned the idea of Iowa having a chance to rewrite its water history. Tell us about that.
Absolutely. I just came to Iowa 18 months ago, so my family's new to the area, and it is just made this great impression on me about how we have such an opportunity to rewrite Iowa's water story. The interactions I've had recently with IDOLs, the governor's office, farmers in the field, everybody wants to have this new story. Everybody wants to have folks to look at Iowa and really think about the great things that we're doing rather than the news that's out right now nationwide about the not great things that we're doing. And I firmly believe that in the next 10 to 15 years, people are going to be talking about us for the right things and not the things that they're saying right now.
That's great. Compare what you guys have been doing, here in central Iowa and in our state compared to other states and kind of struggles that other states are having, and how are we faring, in comparison to the progress?
Heavily agriculture states have struggled also with water quality. We're not the only one. Other states have, Minnesota is often cited as an example of a state that has really focused on conservation and funding for those conservation practices. And so we know it can be done. We just need to keep all working together and keep working at it.
So if there's one thing that you want folks listening, in the tractor cab, we're working on the farm, farmers and city residents alike, to walk away from this conversation understanding is, what would that be? What kind of final thought can you share with them as far as the efforts that you're doing and the cooperation that you're working with?
I think from Des Moines Waterworks' perspective, it is that, we all want to do the right thing. We all rely on water. We all want clean water for ourselves, for our families. And I don't think there's anyone listening who wouldn't agree with that. And it's a matter of working together to really scale up these practices throughout the state of Iowa. So we have really measurable results and progress in the number of conservation practices and their outcomes.
Yeah, I would add to what Amy said. For Central Iowa Waterworks, we're really committed to this upstream, downstream initiative. We're committed to building out $1.2 billion in infrastructure to expand the drinking water supply for Central Iowans. That includes for population growth, and then also really supporting the efforts that are taking place within the watershed, working with IDOLs, with the governor's office on the funding initiatives that happened this legislative session. I agree with Amy. We all want to work together on this. And again, I think we can rewrite Iowa's water story, and we're on the right path.
So that gives you a real sense of what's happening downstream. The sheer complexity of treating water for hundreds of thousands of people, and just how much is riding on what happens upstream long before the water ever reaches a treatment plant. So let's go upstream. That's where Rebekah Jones comes in. Rebekah is the Director of Communications for the Iowa Agriculture Water Alliance, IAWA, and she spends her time working directly with farmers across the state on exactly the kind of conservation practices Amy and Tami were just talking about. Rebekah's got a great personal story here, too. She and her husband went through the process of implementing cover crops on their own land. So she's not just talking theory. Let's get into it. All right, Rebekah, so before we get into the mission of IAWA, tell us about your own connection to this. And I understand you and your family have a great personal story here as landowners.
I grew up on a farm in eastern Iowa, little town called Delhi. We're in the Maquoketa River watershed. And I remember as a kid, how important it was for my dad to protect the land. And, this was before I really understood anything about on-farm conservation. So turns out he had been planting cover crops for quite a while. And I found this out after I started working at IAWA. So that's my background and how I really became connected to the outdoors and nature and this idea of conservation. And when my family, my husband and I purchased a farm in central Iowa a few years ago, and we knew that we wanted to make some improvements to it. And so we fixed up the waterways, working with a really, really great farmer. And I said, well, we got to do cover crops. And that was my introduction to what it looks like to navigate cover crop programs and financing and navigating this as a landowner with your farmer and all of the pieces that go into that. So it was kind of eye-opening.
Well, so your hands-on experience then actually led to the Conservation Compass, right? Tell us about that.
So a few years ago when we were looking into cover crops, well, first of all, for viewers who don't know or for listeners who don't know, there are a lot of programs that will help you pay for cover crops because they can introduce risk to your farm. You know, it's the first time you're trying something and you want to make sure that it's successful. It also costs money to buy the seed and put it in the ground, right? So as we were exploring this option, I was thinking about, what programs do we want to sign up for? And it was kind of overwhelming. There's a lot out there. There's carbon programs, there's public programs, there's programs that have a lot of paperwork, there's ones that don't have a lot of paperwork. And so I started to investigate this and put this together into a spreadsheet for our family to look at. And that was kind of the first version of this tool that we later created and called the Conservation Compass to help people navigate programs.
Fantastic. So let's zoom out here. What is IAWA's role in water quality conversation? And then tell us how you work with farmers across the state and give us some details about that.
Yeah, IAWA stands for Iowa Ag Water Alliance. We were formed by Iowa corn, Iowa pork, and Iowa soybean. And they really wanted someone to wake up every morning and think about water quality and how we could help farmers with water quality practices. And our mission is really about farmer-led conservation. So how can we get farmers to stand up and say, this is the right thing to do for my farm, this is going to help my operation, and it's also going to help my community. And everything we do revolves around that mission.
Well, as you know, farmers obviously deal with input costs and the costs of raising their crop, and soil conservation, water conservation comes with a price. But you have some practices that you like to share. What are some of the practices that are out there and the most common ones you see farmers using?
Mm-hmm. Well, we like to think about conservation practices from an infield perspective and an edge of field perspective because they are really just two different styles of how we can get things done, right? So inside the field, we can talk about cover crops and no-till and nutrient management. Those are all great ways to keep nutrients in the field. And from a long-term perspective, it helps with soil health, and soil health is important for your yields. It helps prevent erosion, which is good for your land value. But those can be harder things to accomplish because it requires year after year learning how to implement the cover crops, the no-till. But once you get there, farmers are telling us it is a good experience, but it takes some risk. Then we talk about edge of field practices, which is a little bit more hands-off for the most part. So there's these underground filters called bioreactors or saturated buffers. Those connect to a tile outlet at the edge of the field, and they clean water. Farmers don't even have to worry about them. They just exist there. They really want to go big. Wetlands are a great option. This year, especially as I've been driving around, I've noticed a lot of places that have prairie potholes in central Iowa. So we've gotten all this rain recently and it's like a pothole, right? So it's just collecting all this water and those crops are not going to yield well, if at all, right?
I love that. I'd never heard that term, prairie potholes.
Yeah.
You see them all the time when you're driving out in the country. Absolutely. Yep.
And it feels, I don't know. I mean, sometimes you're like, oh, that's just a wet spot in a field. But that shouldn't be normal, right?
Right.
And so those are areas where, sure, you could probably put in some tile and help it drain a little bit better. But it also could be a great place for a wetland because why waste putting seed in the ground, money into it? So we always say farm the best, restore the rest. And so those are great areas for a wetland to kind of capture some of that water, which helps to store the water too.
Well, with some of our soybean farmers who are listening to this, this could be a big overwhelming thing, and they've got a lot of other things to do, especially if they're also like raising livestock. There's a lot of daily work they have to do and maybe haven't really put their thoughts into this and try to figure out, what would you say to someone who hasn't started yet or maybe is like, this is too big for me right now?
I would say take the first step. Try one thing. You don't have to go all in on conservation your first year. That would be kind of crazy, actually, right? So start with one thing. Maybe it's reducing a tillage pass. Maybe it's reducing your nitrogen a little bit. Maybe it's simply calling a conservation agronomist. You just got to keep moving forward. We can't be stagnant. We can't stay in the same place.
Just having somebody come out and just assess what's going on and on your land and maybe offer some suggestions, a great start without having to do much work on your own, right?
Well, and conservation agronomy is free. I don't know that a lot of people realize that, especially with Iowa Soybean Association. They employ this whole team of people who are experts in both sustainability and profitability to help you agronomically figure out the situation in the best way possible. And it's free.
Do you have any stories of farmers that, really didn't want to enter into the whole conservation thing or water quality thing and whose eyes were open and are now huge advocates?
I think that honestly is most of the farmers we talk to, where they try something the first year out of necessity. Maybe their tillage equipment was broken. So they're like, well, guess we're not doing that this year. Or, a neighbor nudged them to try cover crops and they're like, we'll see. It's not really my thing, but we'll see how it goes. And I feel like those are the first steps and oftentimes it goes well and they keep getting deeper and deeper and see the benefits, but it does require a lot of management in some cases.
Tell us about this not being an either or between upstream and downstream. What does that mean?
That's a really good question. And I think that we need to be talking more about, both and instead of either or, like you said. So, some people wonder, why not just add more capacity to our utilities to remove nitrates and not worry about the problem upstream? And my answer to that is, well, I think we need to do both. So it's not either or, as you said, it's both and. This is about more than just drinking water. It's about recreation. It's about the beauty of our landscape. It's about being able to go fishing, all these different things. So if we're not thinking about upstream, we're not thinking about that too.
Beyond conservation, water quality, what other benefits do farmers see from using these practices?
Well, and that's where I go back to infield and edge of field. So if we're working on cover crops, no-till, those types of things in field, the hope is that they're going to see some soil health improvements. And with better soil, you're going to have better infiltration of water into the ground. It's going to hold on to water better resilience. Nutrients are going to stay where they need to be for your growing season. Those are all fantastic benefits. Some of them take time. And when we think about edge of field, like wetlands and prairie, you get the habitat benefit. We talk to farmers who install a wetland and their kids love it. It's something they can all be proud of and go look out the back door and see how that is just a beautiful part of their neighborhood now. So I think there's a lot of things to talk about in terms of benefits.
So if a farmer listening today wants to figure out what might work for their operation, we've talked a bit about this, but give details about who do they call? How do they get it started? What's the first step they take?
I think the first step is figuring out your goal. And you might do that by yourself, or you might do that by calling a conservation agronomist. But is your goal to improve your soil health? Is your goal to mitigate a drainage problem? Is your goal to reduce weed pressure? I mean, there's a lot of different ways we can start and then look at that from a conservation perspective. And that's where the conservation agronomist is a really great resource. And they're going to be the experts at talking you through, okay, what are the next steps to accomplish that goal?
Would you want listeners, both farmers and non-farming Iowans, to walk away from this segment understanding? And how can you kind of shape that so that everyone's in it together?
I always ask other people this question. It's a hard one. And now you're asking me, so I have to answer it. I mean, I think everyone wants situations to be cut and dry, to have a very specific answer, a silver bullet. And that's not just with farming and conservation. I think that's all of the issues that we face today. And that's just not realistic. The reality is these are nuanced issues. And sometimes the solutions are nuanced. Sometimes a farmer is going to plant a rye cover crop that covers the ground all year long. Sometimes they're going to plant an oat, which only covers it half the year. That's just one example, right? I think that that's a really important takeaway as we try to have productive discussions about solutions.
Well, you hit it on the head, and I think a lot of people sometimes want to point fingers if they feel like their water quality isn't good, their drinking water, for example. But once you learn about all of these things that farmers and people in the ag community are doing, it starts to make you feel better about the future, right?
Yeah. Well, I think that's a key to progress is having hope. Like no one wants to keep moving forward if they don't think there's a light at the end of the tunnel.
Absolutely. IAWA has a business council, and I'm assuming that these businesses are maybe some of them are non-ag businesses. Is that right?
Yeah, a few of them are.
So why are they involved? Is it out of curiosity and how they can help the water quality issue in the state or how it affects them?
So I would touch on, we use this term market-based solutions, which I feel like is jargony, but it basically means solutions that make money. Okay, so if we want water quality solutions, conservation solutions to make sense, they have to be profitable. And that is for the farmer, right? So we talk about soil health being important and maybe a motivator to get involved with some of these practices, but they also have to be profitable from a B2B perspective. So the businesses who are working with those farmers. So we think about cover crop dealers, we think about seed companies, how can we find ways to incorporate conservation into their product line or into their philanthropy or their corporate sustainability piece of their mission? I think those are really important things to think about because it's got to be everybody together working on this issue. Another thing that we like to say is one water. We're all connected by water. And so we talked about upstream, downstream, and how it's not either or, it's both. We also should be talking about public-private. So it's not only public funding that's going to solve this, although public funding probably does make up the majority of how we fund conservation in the states, I think. But we have to be thinking about how can private investment also support conservation? How can we bridge if there's any sort of divide or gap between public and private, how can we bridge that to make us successful together?
Well, and if I say I owned a business that had a huge footprint of land, I would be like, I want to learn about some of these things, even in my landscaping and how am I conserving water and using it to beautify. There's so many things you can learn. I'm just a little yard farmer and I'm fascinated by some of this stuff, so.
Well, and it creates more beautiful spaces too. Like Corteva in their Johnston campus, they have a whole wetland.
Yes.
And it's a great place for people to come because this is a worldwide company. And so for people to come and see that is just a great example of how they're invested in conservation. The other piece of this is I think there are a lot of companies that are more urban-based that are investing a lot of money into conservation, whether that's for water quality and a public health perspective, but also from a recreation perspective and wanting people to get outdoors. And so I hope that continues to grow momentum and we see more of that moving forward.
Rebekah gave us the big picture, the range of practices out there, and how IAWA is working with farmers to put them into action. Now we're taking you to an actual farm to see what that looks like in practice year after year. That's Patrick White. Patrick farms corn and soybeans up in Clay County near Spencer. Some of it with his dad and uncle, some with his wife Gina. His family's been doing this a long time. His dad started no-till back in 2002 and covered crops in 2013, and Patrick's carried that forward on his own ground since 2021. We chatted with Patrick over Zoom, and here's what he had to say.
Yeah, so my name is Patrick White, and I'm a corn and soybean farmer, and I grew up just west of Spencer, Iowa, and we farm west of Spencer and north of Peterson, Iowa as well. That's my main operation there, and I've got about 180 acres of corn and soybean rotation that I farm by myself, and then I also farm with my wife and my dad and my uncle as well, and it's all pretty much in that west of Spencer to north of Peterson area here in Clay County.
Well, conservation is not new to your family. I understand, more than 20 years ago, your dad started no-till, right?
Yeah. Right around 2002, 2003, I was 7 or 8 years old. We started no-tilling our soybeans. We were expanding the farm. We had a lot of acres, and we just flat out ran out of time in the fall to run over all the corn stalks. So it's kind of out of necessity that we tried it. We tried it, I believe, on as 40 or 60 acres or something like that, and then we expanded to the whole field, which was 240 acres, and then expanded to the rest of the operation here after that. So we've been doing that since 2002, 2003, and had tremendous success there with our no-till beans.
How long have you been doing cover crops?
Yeah, so Dad started with cover crops in 2013 was the first year we tried it. We really didn't get really fully into it until about 2017. That was the first year we planted soybeans into green living rye. We've been doing that since 2017 on our farms, and then I've been doing that since 2021. I guess it started farming. I was luckily able to buy a farm across the road from where I grew up in the fall of 2019 and into 2020, and we've been using cover crops and no-till and strip-till on that farm ever since then. So I've been using cover crops myself since about 2021 or so.
Well, you talked about, your dad doing it out of necessity, no-till, and
Yep.
and then expanding it, all across the operation. What was he seeing? What were you watching as a young person that showed the benefits of that and made you expand it the way you did?
Yeah, I mean, we didn't see a yield drag or anything like that. I mean, it was a little bit challenging to get the planter set right, and it was, just a little bit nerve-wracking to go in there with an untilled field and make sure that you get the planter, in the ground and get the seed at the depth that you want and everything like that. But, after we got over that hurdle, and we saw no yield drag and stuff like that, we were like, well, geez, we might as well save this time and expand it in the operation. If it works on this soil type, maybe we'll try it over here on this sandier soil type. And it ended up working across our whole operation and saving us a lot of time here in the fall. And we can get onto other things.
Well, you've said that using these practices is really about profitability and building a more resilient operation, not just conservation for its own sake. Can you unpack how those two things are sort of symbiotic?
Yeah. On the profitability side of things, I mean, I think it goes hand in hand. I mean, the more you implement the principles of soil health, the more profitable you're going to be and the more resilient your farm is going to be just because your soil's in a healthier state. It's no different than if you're healthy and you're trying to run a marathon, or if you're sick and trying to run a marathon, you're going to run a lot faster when you're healthy. On the profitability side of things, I've been trying to use, like the rye ahead of soybeans to be able to skip a pre-emerge herbicide pass. I mean, obviously skipping the tillage passes and things like that too just helps just on iron costs and fuel costs, but really just skipping that pre-emerge herbicide pass on beans is kind of what I've been focusing on here recently. And then also just on my own farm in the past, it's been 6 years, I guess now, we've increased our organic matter level by about 1.5% since our first soil test in 2020. And so, with that, we've been able to increase the amount of water holding capacity that we've got on that farm and our water infiltration rate and things like that. So I think that's definitely helped out with our water management there. And it's definitely, helps the crop hang on for, I think it's like 5 to 7 more days, something like that, for a rain versus when it used to, just because you've got so much more, of that sponge there in the soil. We've got so much more water holding capacity that it really helps the crop in harder times. So, not only is it helping the environment and it's helping everybody downstream, but it's also helping, helping my pocketbook. And I think that's the way it should be. I think that's the way these practices are really going to expand. If you can make them profitable and better for everybody around you, I think if we can do both of those things, that's how we're going to see major change.
Those tools you use to, show that measurable change in your own ground, how did you discover those, or what are they? Did you get help? How did that work?
Yeah. So we started out just with a regular soil test, and then we started implementing the Haney soil health test. So we've done the Haney test about 3 years. I do it about every other year on my farm just because of the expense of it. But we've been able to track our, like they call it the CO2 burst score. And essentially they put your soil in testing and stuff, and they find out how much CO2 is coming off of it. And then that tracks your amount of microbes that you got in your soil, your amount of life. And we've been able to track those numbers. They've been going consistently higher as we've implemented, no-till and manure and cover crops into our operation. So we've been able to track our metrics with that, with our organic matter, just with all of our soil health metrics and stuff, and they've all been trending higher. But we've been throwing the kitchen sink at it though too.
Well, with over 400 different types of soil in Iowa. Obviously you're farming really different pieces of ground.
Yep.
You have a sandier farm, a heavier soil. How does that shape the way you think about water and conservation?
Yeah, on the two different soil types, really, for me, it's proved that the principles of soil health, as long as you use context, they do work across all sorts of different soil types. So, I've got a 95 CSR farm and a 56 CSR farm, and we've been doing the same soil health practices and things like that, and we've been seeing the same kind of results. It's definitely different year over year because they're different farms, but overall, the overall trend over time has been better. So, and on both farms, there is similarities. I know we've got better infiltration on both of them. You can see earthworms like crazy. You can see about 24 earthworms in a shovel full of soil on both farms. So we've got similarities, but even though they're different soil types, we're seeing the same types of benefits on both farms.
The water consumer,
Yep.
sees the value in clean water, obviously. Maybe in 15, 20 years ago, there was sort of a disconnect between the water consumer and, what farmers were doing and starting to develop as far as conservation and water quality. What do you see agriculture's role and responsibility in this conversation now and into the future?
Yeah, I think we're very responsible for the water quality concerns in the state of Iowa. I think there is something to be said about, the people in the residential areas, doing things with their lawns, but on a percentage basis, I think farmers make up a larger, portion of that. I think your common person going up and down the street in Iowa they definitely have heard about our water quality concerns. And I think most people are at least somewhat concerned about our water quality. I think farmers have a big part in that. I think they have a good seat at the table to try and address these issues and things like that. I think we play a huge role in the reduction of just flat out in the reduction of nitrogen going into our water systems. We've got to keep driving new innovative practices in order to get the kind of the low hanging fruit, if you will, on the most acres. If we can, do things like split apply nitrogen or incentivize people to use cover crops in a different manner. I think the state of Iowa pays like $600 million a year for water quality. And I think we need to see a larger measurable change in the amount of nitrates going into our water supply for the amount of money that we're spending. We just need to be more effective with it, I think.
So are you talking more research then? Is that what you're thinking? You want to see more research?
Yeah, I could see more research too, because we don't really know exactly what the worst offenders are. Everybody thinks about the nitrogen that you apply and stuff too. That's kind of easy, but if you're out there, tilling in soybean stubble in the fall, that's been found, to be a big contributor too. So it's not just what you apply, it's kind of your practices and stuff too. And I think we need to do more research to figure out what exactly is, some of the largest contributors and then take it a step further of how can we, mitigate that on the largest amount of acres.
You talk about protecting topsoil, and you mentioned how thin a ton of topsoil actually is per acre. Tell us your thoughts on that.
Yeah. So a ton of topsoil per acre is as thick as a sheet of paper is thick. So people in the spring, you hear oh, it's, the dirt's blowing. It's not that much. Well, it really is. It really is a lot. And a lot of that goes to the lowest lying areas, which is basically the ditch. And what else goes in the ditch is the water. And that carries, the topsoil and nutrients and everything right down on into our waterways. And it's really frustrating for me to see people fall all over themselves to buy a farm for $20,000 an acre up here in Northwest Iowa or more, and then have it blow the next year. And you see that, see the topsoil in the ditch. It just doesn't make any sense. I think we need to be, for as expensive as this land is and as valuable as it is, I think we need to definitely take another look at what we're leaving for the next generation and if that value is going to stay there. Because everybody talks about urban sprawl and data centers and wind turbines and everything taking land. Well, there's a lot of tops of hills that are down to the B horizon, and the A horizon's already gone. And so, there's a lot of, you talk about urban sprawl, but there's a lot of topsoil that's gone too. So it's definitely, two different things working against it there. But I think, overall, your topsoil is your best part of your farm, and you've really got to do your best to keep that protected.
What would you say to another farmer who feels like this is just too big an issue for them specifically just to make a dent, or, aren't sure where to start? what would you say to them?
But I think the easiest way to get started is just start on a few acres and then have that be a reason to be able to tell your story. You need something to be able to say, hey, farmers might be, part of the problem with water quality, but this is what I'm doing on my farm to combat that. And I think that goes a long way because it kind of puts a face to the farmer, and it, builds a relationship with that consumer. And, let's face it, farmers want clean water too, just like the end consumer, everybody too. And I think if you can take steps on your farm to make things better, and then you can, take it a step further and, showcase to people that don't farm what you're doing and that you're part of the solution. I mean, just do anything to be part of the solution, really, I think is about the best you can do.
Have you personally hopped on a friend's farm or somebody who reached out to you to see what you were doing and try to help them? And what kind of cooperation are you seeing among farmers who really are working hard for no-till and soil conservation as far as helping?
Yes, I had a person in the eastern part of Clay County get started with rye with me, and we ended up selling him some of our extra seed, and we helped him get that seeded out there with the co-op, and then we helped answer his questions and stuff in the spring. And it was just really just a big hurdle of going in there and planting green, taking your planter in a field of living rye and planting into it. So he's had success with it, and he's done it the last couple of years now. And I've been really proud of doing that. And I think it's just everybody's got somebody in the area that's doing it. They're more than willing to share.
Okay, so sort of to wrap it up, if there's one thing you want listeners, especially non-farmers, what would you want them to understand about what's happening on the ground with conservation?
I think bottom line is that farmers do care. Overall, we all drink the water. I'd say the majority of us have family in different cities, especially in Des Moines and Iowa. There's a lot of people out here that care, and I think we're all out here trying to do the right thing. But I think it's we really need to do a better job of doing the right thing for our operation and pairing that with doing the right thing for water quality as well. I think if we can pair those two together, I think we'll get broad-based change, and we'll have a way better agriculture here in the next decade.
So there you have it. One water, three perspectives, and honestly, a lot more common ground than you might expect. Amy and Tami talked about wanting to be partners, not adversaries. Rebekah talked about it not being either or. It's both. And Patrick, a farmer, sat here and told us straight up that agriculture has a real role to play, and he's not shying away from that. That's the through line. Downstream, upstream, rural, urban. Everybody's got a piece of this, and the folks doing the real work aren't waiting around for someone else to go first. Now, before we go, it's time for your fun soy fact. Did you know that many newspapers and textbooks use soy ink? That's perfect timing for some back-to-school trivia. Thank you for listening to The Bean Scene, proudly brought to you by the Iowa Soybean Association and the Soybean Checkoff. Find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. And follow the Iowa Soybean Association on Facebook, LinkedIn, X, or YouTube. We'll catch you next time, where Iowa soy meets life. Until then, keep growing.